And now that recording is going, welcome to the Linkerd community meeting. What month is it? October? Almost November? I think I got that right. Uh, we are going to be chatting a little bit about Linkerd 2.9, which is coming out very imminently. I'm excited to hear all of the interesting changes we've had there. And then we have two presentations. Nassim is going to be taking us through his Prometheus article. Really looking forward to that. And then Kevin did a blog post recently on SLOs and how Linkerd helps out there. So super excited to hear about that as well. And then finally, our favorite sections that come back every month, Linkerd Heroes and Stump the Maintainer. So save up your questions towards the end. William tried to stump us already by asking if any cool demos would be scheduled this time. And obviously, yes, because we have Kevin and Nassim chatting us through all the awesome stuff they've done recently. So to kick this off, let me poke Oliver and have him chat with us a little bit about. I apologize. I hit the wrong button there, Oliver. Tell us a little bit about what's coming in 2.9. You're muted, Oliver.
No, it wouldn't let me unmute. There we go. Uh, about the same thing I've been saying for the last 4 community meetings. We've been hard at work stabilizing and landing a bunch of kind of new features, especially on the proxy side. So the big change from the proxy side is that we've really redone how service discovery works, especially on the outbound side. So right when you have a client that's connecting to another pod or a service, now instead of doing discovery based on the host headers or the authority and the HTTP2 requests, we use the socket information. So if you're trying to connect to the service IP, we'll resolve that in load balance, or if you're just trying to connect to a pod directly, we'll not do any load balancing, we'll just forward it directly. That sets up, that enables, for one, TCP MTLS. We also have traffic split working for TCP and TCP load balancing, all things that fell out of that. And we're setting up to do TCP MTLS for multi-cluster, but that will not land in 2.9. That'll be 2.10 work. So that's taken months and months to get done and tested, and we feel pretty good about it. We've gotten a lot of good feedback from the last couple RCs, and we put out, I think, hopefully a final RC yesterday. We might do another really small one later in the week, but we're aiming to get 2.9 out next week. So unless you find bugs, I'd rather you find bugs before we do the release. So let us know.
Yeah, and I think one of the implications for folks is that some interesting stuff has happened on the ingress side because we are doing discovery on IP addresses now. If you want to do session stickiness through your ingress controller, that works pretty much out of the box now, with the caveat that if you want to do traffic splits, you need to add a header in, which is what's going out in the on the edge today, right? Or did that go out yesterday? Cool. It's out. Let me man, that's annoying. Ugh. Okay, I give up. I don't know how to do the Zoom things. Awesome. Let's see. So some of the other stuff that's in 2.9, just so that folks have a reminder. Let's see. Service topologies is landed, and I think Charles has been testing that as we speak. I saw a bunch of questions around hosting providers and support for endpoint slices. So I'm super interested to see where that goes.
One of the big things that happened tonight is that we got ARM support, which is actually really well timed because AWS has really cheap ARM hosts you can use.
Yeah, and I know Charles has done a bunch there. I'm gonna have to go and build myself a Raspberry Pi cluster just to run some Kubernetes and Linkerd somewhere.
I mean, like I said, I think AWS even has Gravitron that you can use, which is supposed to be much cheaper than the standard Intel hosts.
And the benchmarks are pretty good on it too. Last time I saw.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting.
Yeah, for sure. I'm interested to see what their I/O support is, what kind of IOPS you can push on those new instances. So let's see. We had service topologies. We've got ARM support. We've got bring your own Prometheus, which I'm super excited about, making it so that folks can configure that. We had, I think their Grafana stuff went out in the last release, right, Tarun? Grafana was in 2.8.
Yep, it was in 2.8.
Cool. Um, Something else to potentially bring up is the interesting performance work you've been doing, Oliver, on one of the cool implications of moving over to doing discovery on IP addresses, that we've been able to do some cool performance work there.
Yeah, actually, a lot's changed performance-wise in the proxy. So it kind of at this, in July, we merged multi-core support. And so what that means is if you give the proxy, if the proxy has access to more than one CPU, it will allocate a thread per CPU. And if you limit it down to one, it'll only use one as it used to. And that means that we can actually push a lot more traffic through a proxy by giving it more threads, which is a user request we were getting more and more. And also because we've taken out most of the kind of per request work that we'd have to do in terms of routing, the latency overheads and memory overhead has been dropped a bunch in most use cases. And we continue to dig into the performance aspects. But the early benchmarks look much, much better than 2.8. Feeling really good about it.
The multi-core stuff is pretty great, just because I know a lot of folks would run into the, like, this is benchmarky, so take it with a grain of salt, but about 10,000 requests per second per core limit they would run into, especially on their ingress controllers, and it would be kind of a long conversation there to explain what was going on. Having that removed so you can scale vertically is going to be pretty great.
Also, I learned that you can save about 30% of the memory if you just turn logging off in the proxy. I don't recommend you do it if you want to file bugs, but if you need to eke out every last meg of your cluster, then you can do that.
It's logging is one of the interesting performance issues that always comes up. Almost everybody wants to turn on access logging, and then you have to have the conversation about how disks are slow, and sticking that in the fast path is going to slow everything down. It's one of those like unintended consequences that if you don't think about the system holistically, you don't know what's going on. Cool.
30% is pretty significant, though. That's nice.
Yeah, I mean, we're doing some more work on the logging infrastructure to improve that. But yeah, and we've kind of noticed two phases. One where we've turned down most of the kind of extra context, so it's only debug level now, and that should save a bunch of latency in normal cases. So before we'd kind of record all of this, per request context and put it in the logging system in case something got logged, and we've turned that all down for debug for the most part, because you usually don't see most of that, and that improves latency somewhat. And then turning off all of the logging infrastructure entirely, if we don't allocate any of those data structures, it saves even more. So I'd expect more improvements there in 2.10, but we were able to really dig in and make some better defaults for 2.9.
Cool. All right. I think that's the 2.9 update. Since it's going out next week, knock on wood, next community meeting we'll be able to walk through what 2.10 has. So I'm excited to hear that. And now, Nassim, do you want to walk us through your alerting blog post? I'm really excited about this one. I've been wanting built-in alerting in Linkerd for years, I think, at this point in time.
Sure. Well, now you got it. Hi, thanks for having me. I think we're gonna do like a fireside style chat with Charles. I think we're gonna do it that style.
Yep. We're gonna do a little more interactive this time. So, yeah. So Nassim and I were chatting and thought, this would be a little more fun than just listening to somebody talk at a camera for 15 or 20 minutes, have like an interactive discussion and see how the dialogue goes. So I've got a few questions for you, Nassim, and wherever the conversation takes us is great. But really, I just want to start with like, what inspired you to write this blog post, this article? And for those of you who don't know, I'll put it into the chat, but it's also on our community minutes. I'll just put the community minutes in the chat. How about that? So yeah, what inspired you to write this?
The fact that people have been wanting alerting with Linkerd metrics for a while now, and I don't think there was any example of this documented. I was happy with the outcome. And so I said, why not just put into a quick how-to for others to build on, either replicate entirely or build on top of. And it was just like a how-to. I didn't really go into the why you want to alert or philosophies on alerting and making sure your alerts are actionable. It was just kind of just like for those who decide they want to alert on when their services are in a degraded state. Here you go. Here's a how-to.
That's awesome. So that was actually my next question. It's your article is very much like, this is how you get it done, which is great. These tutorials are really helpful for folks who, you know, a lot of us work for small companies and we're working at startups and we just need to get things done. So yeah, can you talk about a little more about the why? Like, where did you recognize in your application that you needed more alerting, or and what was the reasoning behind it?
It was kind of maintaining the alerting we already had. So basically we migrated from our previous alerting setup for those alerts. They were based on metrics that were collected at the ingress controller level. So at the ingress controller, you get error rates and you could calculate error rates and whatnot. So we're using those previously, but we migrated from the ingress controller we were using to load balancer. And upon migrating, we said we would move those alerts to the metrics collected by the other load balancer that we're moving to, but it got complicated. And then it dawned on me, hey, there's alert manager support for Linkerd now, and we're using Linkerd, so why not just alert at the service level? What kind of weighed out some things, and I was like, yeah, let's go, let's do it. And it worked out well. So it was to maintain a level of alerting we already had, basically. And we had migrated from a vendor previously. So we used to pay a vendor quite a lot of money for this type of stuff. And then we cut those costs. We moved to Nginx ingress metrics. We moved out of Nginx ingress, so we moved it to Linkerd now. And that's basically it. And why were these error rate alerts there in the first place? Like a lot of you know, if you push bad code or bad config, your service gets a degraded states, it starts to emit 500 level HTTP errors, HTTP status codes, 500 and above, which is bad and generally not expected. So you want to know when that happens. While you could deploy and watch your dashboard as you deploy, which you probably should do, you might not always, you can't guarantee that, and having the alerts fire off if things go wrong is good. And at times it won't only happen when you're deploying, maybe a couple hours later, something will happen and you'll start getting a degraded state of your service, i.e. more errors, and you want to know about it so you could address that.
So another thing that I'm hearing, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, is you were previously getting error rates at the ingress level, but now that you're getting metrics at the service level from Linkerd, you've got much more granular control. So if a request comes in and it goes through 2 or 3 services, and like the farthest downstream service sends an error and propagates it back up, it just looks like it happens at the ingress level. But now you have that alerting at that downstream service.
Yeah, both of these worked for us. And yeah, that's right. It's like more at the so service to service calls. Those errors are now, getting picked up and could be alerted on if there's like, but usually like in our case at least, if there's an error internally, it usually surfaces at the ingress. So both approaches work for us, but it's nice to have it in Linkerd because now it's independent of what our ingress is. Hopefully we won't be changing load balancers anytime soon, but it's very nice to have with Linkerd.
Nassim, you had mentioned how to alert and making sure that you're getting out of bed only for actionable stuff. One
Yes.
of the interesting, I'm going to call it, downsides of moving from just getting alerts on ingress to getting alerts on every service means that you're potentially getting a lot more alerts. How did you manage the verbosity there?
There was no increased verbosity in our case, so not very interesting answer. But yeah, uh,
So did the
that's
more granular? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
no. I said. I mean, that's it. We didn't get an increased. We didn't get noise. We didn't get noise. No.
I was going to ask if having that more granular visibility into those alerts, did that, how did that affect your like mean time to detection and mean time to resolution?
It. I would say it kept it. It's kind of the same, because we don't. I don't know. We don't have like these super long chains of microservices. Maybe 2 or 3 services might talk to each other internally to service a request. And yeah, they were bubbling up the same. The alerts were kind of similar in both cases so far.
Gotcha.
I like both methods. I prefer the Linkerd method for. It's just nicer to make use of the service mesh even more, you know. So.
To add on to Thomas's question there, in your article you mentioned that you have a very funny comment about how Linkerd connects to Prometheus and Prometheus connects to the alert manager and the alert manager connects to the PagerDuty. Are there other options other than PagerDuty for your alert manager? I mean, just for example, you hear folks using these Slack ops things. So could you tie alert manager into Slack if you wanted to get alerts there? What are the other options?
Yeah, so I'll post in the chat this link. Basically, alert manager allows you to configure notification channels such as Slack, email, and even a generic webhook. So the possibilities are endless. I'd suggest checking out that link. And then, yeah, that's good.
And then, so you're now alerting off of the error rates, which is one of the golden metrics or golden signals that Linkerd provides.
Yeah.
Do you have any plans to change or to start looking at latencies for alerting?
So after having done the error rate based alerts with Linkerd, it's like for sure very doable to do the latency alerts as well. And it's very nice to know that we could do this through Linkerd. However, today, just due to the backlog that we have, and latency is already covered, we're doing this with our load balancer metrics, the latency alerts today. We're just going to leave it at that for now. But it definitely doable. Just same principle, except you calculate a latency metric instead of error rate.
Gotcha. So along that line, I just thought of a question. So when you have the shoot, it slipped my mind now. So you're collecting metrics based off of error rates. If you were to collect them off of latencies, you could get that from the Linkerd metrics. The question that I was going to ask is, you created a config map. According to the article, you created a config map that had the record rate.
Yeah, the recording rule and the alerting rule.
Recording rule. That's what I was thinking of. So, how difficult was it to set up that recording rule for the error rates?
It was a little bit of trial and error. I took a lot, like I kind of looked at the Grafana of Linkerd, see what they're doing there. Okay, I see that's the metric they use. I went to the SRE book and I looked at the example alerts that they have there, and I was like, okay, put it together, and it's not too bad. But it's nice that there's a nice example now for everybody.
Yeah, well, we definitely appreciate the example. The community appreciates the example. And, you know, I struggle with PromQL every once in a while. So it's nice to know that there are people like you out there writing these tutorials and articles to help the community out. One last question that I have for you, and then I'll turn it over to Thomas or anybody else who might want to ask you questions about the article. I think I've read some of your other articles, your other posts, and you seem to use Simpsons references pretty frequently. How big of a Simpsons fan are you? Where did this love come from?
Sorry, but what other post did I do Simpsons reference on? I don't think I
I'm
did.
certain maybe it was a tweet. I'm certain though that I saw
Yeah?
you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Forget. I have a bad memory though.
Me too.
Simpsons. It was a staple in the mid to late 90s for me. I was in elementary school, and after school I'd watch it at 5 o'clock. But I think towards the 2000s, I find things just changed for the worse. Not only in my life, but Simpsons as well. And I think Family Guy came along, and that was a good show, but I think Simpsons lost their identity and was trying to do Family Guy stuff. And I just, in the 90s, it was a staple and a great social commentary. But after it kind of, 2000s plus. I don't know how.
Well, it's amazing that
I don't watch now.
that's what I was about to say. So next time we'll expect to see a Family Guy reference in one of your blog posts. So great. Does anybody on the call have any questions for Nassim? Any specifics about the article? This is your chance to this is your chance to pick his brain.
Yeah, is anybody alerting on error rates today with a paid vendor, or are anyone thinking about, wanting to alert on error rates? And the alert on the error rate that's described in the article is like, your error rate is beyond 1% for 5 minutes, fire an alert. That's the example. You could play with those thresholds, the threshold and the time.
Okay, well, I'm not seeing any questions in chat. So again, Nassim, thanks for being part of the community. Thanks for your awesome contributions and for helping folks who I know have the same experiences and same challenges and want to be able to track things like this on their own as well. So I know that your article is going to be helpful for people, and we just really appreciate you being part of the community. And I have promised you a sash. It will get to you someday.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, and thanks for making Linkerd. It's great.
Oh, wow. That's the team here for sure. So thanks to the community for that. Thomas, why don't we kick it over to Kevin for his talk about SLOs, which ties in nicely to the Prometheus stuff. So these are two things that are complementary to each other, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think today's theme is error rates. That's what it sounds like. It's error rates all the way down. I'm not sure.
And PromQL.
And PromQL. We all need to go get a dissertation on PromQL, like Matei.
And The Simpsons.
And The Simpsons. Now I'm going to go write some white paper that's like a mashup of PromQL with Simpsons references. PromQL, how to look through the backlog, data mining of Simpsons references through PromQL. I'm going to make millions off of this idea. Cool. Kevin, please save me before I fill nothing but empty air.
Yeah, you should go on. It's entertaining. Yeah, so I'm Kevin. I recently wrote an article about calculating SLOs using Linkerd and Prometheus, and just with the timing of Nassim's article coming out, and what he was trying to cover in his, that they ended up, they connect pretty well in taking the whole concept of what we can gather from service mesh, stat-wise, and making actionable decisions based off of that. So I don't know, similar to how Nassim and Charles talked about the blog post, I don't know if I necessarily want to sit here and share a screen for all different Prometheus queries and stuff for calculating SLOs, but I was thinking I could at least just talk a little bit about where this blog post where it came from, why I decided to write it, and hopefully answer some questions on, what you can do with calculating SLOs and taking it further. So I guess I'll kind of start out with what exactly an SLO is and why we care about it. So an SLO stands for service level objective. And what it does is that it allows you to define a level of failure that is acceptable for services that you may have. And what I mean by this is that there are certain metrics that you're collecting for your services. One of those may be success rate or latency. And what this allows you to do as a service owner is say, over the course of 7 days, 14 days, whatever time frame, I want 80% of my responses to be successful. Or over the course of 7 days, I want 90% of my responses to be served in less than 100 milliseconds. And this allows you to really, it allows you to look at your service health and figure out, just be able to look at a number and say, okay, this service is performing in this way. And instead of saying, over 10 days, instead of looking at a service and seeing that 80% of requests are successful, an SLO actually can give you a measurement and let you make a decision on, now's a good time to, hold back on releasing something because we are pretty close to, we said that 80% of our requests are going to be successful over 7 days, and right now we're at 80%. So maybe we should hold back on making a release for a few days and build up some a little bit of buffer right now. So yeah, any questions off that so far?
So would you say an SLO kind of helps you decide whether you should focus on pushing out new features or focus on reliability work by kind of seeing how much budget you have available? That's right.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's defining what level of failure is acceptable based off of any metric that you choose, and it tells you how much of failure room you have left. So, it can be used exactly for that. And, if you have not much failure room left, then maybe right now is not a good time to, release that new version of your application. So, SLO is the objective, and I've talked a few times about, what metric you're deciding to measure this off of. That's the SLI. And the SLI is the service level indicator, and that's just the metric. So, for the blog post and walking through on how to set it up, my metric was successful responses. And I walked through an example on installing Linkerd on your cluster, and then installing a demo application that we recommend to new users called Emoji Voto. And it has some purposeful failures going on. There's it's a little application where you're voting for, your favorite emoji, and, some requests fail more than others. And it allows you to really dig down and see, what services are failing and why. And so for the tutorial that I went over in the blog post, I set an SLO of that over the course of 7 days, 80% of responses would be successful. And yeah, so walked through on how to set this up, and you know, went through all the Prometheus queries and things like that. So kind of like the why on this is that so I work at Buoyant, and we've been putting a lot of effort into a product called Dive, and we've been you know, it builds on a lot of problems that we see users in the Kubernetes space facing. And one of the main highlights of it is that it provides easy access to SLOs. And you know, it allows you to set them up very quickly. It allows you to share SLOs between you know, people that work on this application or use the application. It provides a lot of convenience around SLOs. But the point of this blog post was to really kind of look at just the SLO itself for a single service, and you know, figure out how hard is this to actually, you know, set up based off just like the bare bones Linkerd installation and you know, an application that you're working with. And so the point of this blog post was to step a user through on, you know, if you really just want to look at what an SLO is, and set up like a basic, you know, it's not gonna be the same for all services, and it may not be as shareable at the end of the tutorial as you may find with Dive and stuff. But when it comes down to it, it's really just a pretty simple formula on, you know, it's a ratio of the number of successful requests or whatever metric you're using over the course of whatever time frame you're working with. So the point of the blog post was to show that calculating the SLO really is not, you know, the most complicated thing, and that there's, you know, ways that you can take it further.
Kevin, we had a question for you in the chat. So the Google SRE handbook has some pointers on starting with SLOs. I've, however, had a lot of trouble getting traction and buy-in. Do you have any other pointers or personal anecdotes for working with that? Or William, I'm sure you've got a bunch of knowledge there as well.
Yeah, so I can take a stab at that first, William. If you want to hop in, feel free to. I actually haven't looked at the at Google's SRE book on the SLO section specifically, and I think one of the when you walk through the tutorial that I've been talking about, you can, I hope that you're able to see that when you have Linkerd installed and you have you know, the golden metrics that a service mesh gets you of success rates, latency, and request volumes, and you have those to work with all the time on all your services, that this additional thing that you can provide to people that work on the application or use your application, to be able to say, you know, to be able to work with your users and say, hey, we're gonna focus on serving 80% of our responses successfully. It's pretty easy to set up, and once you have it there and as something that you can refer to, it is pretty helpful to be able to see, you know, to point out like, oh wow, over the last 7 days we have not really been holding up this objective that we told our users that we would have, and it really lets you make decisions when you need to on, you know, holding back a release or feeling confident that it's a good time to make a release. So, you can talk about all the benefits of having it, but once you see that it's really pretty simple to set up, when you already are using Prometheus and Linkerd, that you kind of can just see right from the start that it's nice to have.
I'd also add that like SLOs are about agreements between teams, and so if you can't get other people in your org to make agreements about success rates and uptime, you have like tech tools are not going to solve that. You need people to actually like make agreements as a group. I mean, that's what microservice is about, is setting boundaries between teams and doing that.
Yeah, I have an opinion here, which I'll share, which is that like if you read through the SLO, that SRE book, SLOs are presented as like this really lofty thing where it's like, okay, in order to get an SLO, you have to go through this like exercise with everyone. You got to get the product managers and all the engineers and the SREs in a room, and you all have to agree from like first principles, like what is the right reliability expectation for the service? Is it 3 nines or is it 4 nines? And like, what does it mean to be reliable? And like, you have to go through this, extremely painful organizational exercise. And I think that makes sense, if your goal for SLOs is, I want to make these very sophisticated and nuanced trade-offs between, do we ship this feature or do we maintain reliability? And I need a way to like push back against the product managers. But I actually think there's another use for SLOs, and I kind of like this one that doesn't require, because it's a little more like not Kubernetes focused, but like platform owner focused, and it doesn't require all that stuff, which is basically, just pick something, pick a threshold that kind of makes sense to you. And the value of doing that is that you get an error budget out of these SLOs. And that error budget now is a number that's like between 0 and, well, between 100 and like negative infinity, I guess. But that actually is a number you can compare between services. And so you can use the SLOs as a way of basically translating, success rates and latencies and things like that into these numbers that are all on the same scale. And that's really, really helpful, because you may not always know, what is the right success rate for this service, right? Is it, if you drop from 98% to 97%, is that like a problem or not? Well, now you have a way of kind of characterizing that. And in fact, you can get those error budgets for all of your services, and you can like start sorting your services by them, and like, kind of see where you are. So like you could actually sort everything in your universe by like how painful things are. So yeah, I think I kind of like that aspect of it, and it's not really described in the SRE book that much, but I like it so much that, we're like building a whole product around this idea. So if that sounds appealing to you, hit me up on the Slack over DM.
It's kind of like the
dive is like to take those Linkerd metrics and turn them into that kind of like really SRE focused SLO.
It's almost kind of like the Apple Watch, right? Where the watch gives you a bunch of stats about how you're moving and like how you're doing relative to yourself last week, versus like performance training, where you're going to set really strict objectives and like meet them every day, right? And like SLOs don't have to be just about that kind of like super training performance side. They can also be about just like day to day, how am I doing compared to how I was doing last week and last month.
I'd like to point out, by the way, that if you've got a team who says that it's not okay to talk about success rate, or they're okay with the service failing all the time, there may be a more fundamental problem. My only point there is kind of backing up everybody else. Pick something. If the team has issues with it, modify it. The likelihood that anyone is going to push back on picking a number that says we need to have our service up is very, very low. And so like pick a number and iterate on it, and you can, get there eventually.
Yeah. And the reason I like this whole conversation is because it's so germane to Linkerd. Like the one of the big difficulties with SLOs is getting a consistent layer of metrics. So, okay, we can do that with the service mesh, at least for those, at least for the golden metrics.
Yep. And you don't need to go and use a third-party load balancer with complicated metrics. It makes it hard to figure things out.
I've got a hard question for you guys. I'd love to see a click and create your SLO in Linkerd open source. Like, is that something that would I don't know. Maybe it's reserved for Dive, this kind of thing, Or...
Well, I mean, if you want to write it, well, we're not going to prevent you from merging it, but where we're doing that work is probably more on the product side.
Yeah, I mean, so this is kind of what Kevin was getting at with his blog post, right? It's like it's all a matter of PromQL and like some UI around that, and so yeah, go for it.
Yeah, in fact, it is a great fit for the built-in Grafana dashboards.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, that's great. That would be really cool. Wow.
That could be your claim to fame, Nassim.
You've been promising fame for so long, William. No, I'm just kidding. No,
I assume that the fame is still waiting on Charles to produce this sash that I'm very excited to see, if I'm entirely honest.
I'm excited too. It's in progress. I was trying to get it.
Oh, this joke spiraled out of control. Now that you're actually getting a sash made.
I'm working on it. I'm going to hand make it for you. It may just be a sticker on a ribbon, but you will get a sash from me.
Oh man, Charles, I'm going to be sending you some yarn. I expect some serious knitting here.
Oh, I'm going to have to learn how to knit then.
It'll meet the legal definition of what a sash is.
Yes.
Can't say anything more than that.
That's
right. Kevin, you want anything else you want to cover before we move on to the next section?
Not exactly. So Rio had one more question in there that Oliver, kind of answered in the chat already. But if you don't have the chat open, Rio asked, what techniques would you recommend for services that simply do not get a lot of traffic yet? Possibly running generator or something more subtle. Oliver answered in that, synthetic load won't be very useful at the start, and to focus on the metrics that indicate health, which I definitely agree with. One of the things that Oliver said and William and William as well is the SLO is definitely something that you can reach more as an agreement between teams. So if you're just generating fake traffic and it's not very representative of the users of the application, it may not be very helpful to be reaching, to be monitoring your error budget that way. So even if it's not getting that much traffic, there's still probably traffic coming to it somehow, and you can work with that. So there may not be a lot to work with, but you can still figure out over this time window, we have served the small number of requests that we've had in 100 milliseconds or less, and you can still really pry out some of the metrics that help you indicate the level of health of your service. So yeah, if anyone has anything to that, but yeah, I mainly agree that just generating load isn't going to be that helpful, since the whole point of the SLO is real agreements between you and your users.
And I think that touches on maybe a meta point, which is that the metric, the definition of the SLI is important, in that success rate may work for Nassim, but other folks may want to measure latency, or something else could be the rate of change. Like there's a bunch of different metrics, and so thinking through what health means to you is the important part there.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, Kevin. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Charles, do you want to take us on a journey through the Linkerd heroes?
I do. I'm very excited about this one today. I put some time thinking about it. So we got a glimpse into all the work that's being done on 2.9. I can't share with the community enough how much work has actually been going on for to get 2.9 out from all the maintainers and all the contributors. So if I could, I'd say you're all my heroes. The one person that I've selected, though, is the person behind the scenes who makes all of these things happen. She's currently on her way to send some swag out to the community. So Stephanie is my Linkerd hero this time around. She makes so much good things happen, and without her, the maintainers wouldn't be, well, when we had an office, they wouldn't have been fed in the office, and all the good things that keep the wheels turning, keep the lights on. So she's my hero this time around.
That's a great one. Oliver, do you got any thoughts on hero for this week? This month?
Yeah, I think Alex is probably my hero this month. He really dug into a lot of the Helm debt we've incurred. So I don't know how many people know, but most of the Linkerd install and upgrade, and well, not inject, but most of the Linkerd install and upgrade is driven by Helm in the backend. And it didn't start that way. So it's been a long, slow adoption of Helm as a templating system. And with that came a lot of debt. And so Alex has spent, I think, most of the last 6 weeks or so cleaning that up before the edge, or before the stable. Which will set up the next big set of changes we want to do in 2.10, which is to really make the control plane really minimal and make most of the other things purely add-ons. Good job, Alex.
Thank you. And I think it's really exciting, the work that we've set up here. I'm really, really pumped about being able to make the install more modular and kind of be able to split things out.
Yeah, I think in particular, the Helm stuff is a example of iterating and getting to a better and better design every time. We kind of started out not really understanding how Helm worked or how to fit it into something, or to be honest, Helm wasn't really built for the way we were using it. And over time now it's been getting better and better, which is fantastic. I am going to nominate Tarun for a lot of the same reasons that Oliver nominated Alex. Tarun's been working on the same config management stuff, but also writing a ton of documentation, getting us ready for the release. In particular, he's been doing kind of the unsung work around testing. While we've got a great integration test suite, you need to do a bunch of manual testing before stable release goes out, because there's always little stuff that happens. You need a human there. And Tarun put together a great test plan and has been iterating on that to make sure that the 2.9 stable gets out into everyone's happy hands here very soon. So thank you, Tarun. Cool.
Okay, I think that leaves us with Q&A and Stump the Maintainer. Just enough time for to close out the hour. So I have a couple of questions, but I would like to throw it out to the community first to try and stump our maintainers.
Does not using the host header for thing affect HTTP traffic at all? Or it enables TCP MTLS, but does it do anything to the
So the main caveat for HTTP is that if you're targeting a service IP, so if you're have a cluster IP service and you're sending traffic to that IP, there'll be no behavior change. We know that that's a service. We can do all the discovery based on that. We can do traffic split based on that. We can do load balancing based on that. The caveat is that if you're talking to a headless service where there is no cluster IP, or you're talking to, or your clients do load balancing internally and are contacting each pod, you won't have any service metadata, and we won't do routing in those cases, which is why we had a special case ingress to say. So now with ingress, you can choose between letting the ingress route directly to pods and do its own load balancing and session sickness and all of that, or you can choose to set the header and do header-based routing for ingress. So it's kind of, there's some slight semantic differences, but for the 99% of applications, there should be no change for each of these things.
So I think that ties into one of my questions, which was around the SO original dest header. I know that there's some change. Well, let me ask it this way. What changes in the MTLS for TCP affect using that header? And you know, probably by this question, you can tell that I don't fully understand how it's used or what it does. So could you explain to us?
SO original dest is a TCP socket option, right? So it's decoupled from HTTP. This is something that is set by IP tables. So, the way ProxyNet or CNI works today is that IP table says, okay, you're trying to connect to this IP address on this port. Well, instead, I'm going to rewrite that and send it to the proxy on localhost 4140. When we get that, we can run the socket option on the socket when we accept it and say, well, where was this actually going? So we ask the kernel and say, what was the actual original destination before you rewrote it to the proxy? And so, otherwise we would have no TCP level routing information and we would be unable to forward TCP connections. So now, like previously, we would use the SO original dest as a fallback. So we'd look at all the request metadata, and if there wasn't enough stuff in the request, we'd fall back to that. Or if you're doing TCP, we would use that for routing. Now we've moved discovery. So before you only used to do discovery in the kind of request path. Now we do outbound discovery before we do any protocol detection or anything like that. So before we know whether it's HTTP or TCP, we go to the control plane and say, hey, I'm trying to talk to this endpoint. Give me back its metadata. And so this allows us, we'll be able to do things like transporting server first protocols like MySQL, because we can go to the control plane and can say, actually, you can't do protocol detection on this, but you can forward it on to this proxy and do MTLS and whatever. And so we really just pulled discovery and caching and buffering right into the connection accept, which happens, much less frequently than a request, hopefully, in most applications.
That really helps. Thank you. Any other questions from the community before I ask my last one? Okay. Well, my question is, where did you and Thomas get your amazing gloves?
They're not gloves, they're hand warmers.
Hand warmers.
Well, Thomas had them, and I've been envious for a long time because my hands have been cold every morning. And then I asked him, and I got mine on Amazon, but they're smart wool and they're hard to get, actually.
It's a secret hand warmer society.
Well, I tried to get them from REI and they were sold out, so you might be able to find them. Yeah, just like wool hand covering.
I actually started looking at keyboard hand warmers today because while these are great, the tips of my fingers are still cold, and so I looked, but I decided that it wasn't worth the extra stuff on my desk. I'll just suffer through with cold fingers.
Awesome. Okay, well.
Right on time.
Yeah, I don't have any other questions. So thanks, Thomas, for hosting. Thanks, Oliver, for the great answers to the questions. Thanks to the community for everybody showing up. And then, of course, Nassim and Kevin, thanks for sharing with us all of your knowledges, all the things that you know. And yeah, we really appreciate you being part of the community and taking the time to do these write-ups and these tutorials, because again, I know that they answer people's questions. So it's really, really helpful. So yeah, Thomas, anything else? All righty. Well, thank you, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your week.
Thanks, Kevin. Thanks, Nassim. Thanks,
Thank
Charles.
you.
Yeah, thanks for coming, everyone.
All right, talk to you on Slack.
See you.